We are here at Jimi Hendrix Park. There is going to be a press conference today, this morning, I should say. There is a multitude of lawsuits that are being filed against the state of Washington and the city of Seattle. And this is the press conference that is announcing these lawsuits. And there will be statements from the attorneys. There will be statements from the aggrieved parties. And we will be streaming this event live. We are streaming this unbranded. This is going to be a rare case where I'm going to say this is going to be a really rare case because there's like no copyright statement or anything on the video. If you want to share this, please share this because this is something that is worth having the voices amplified. We really just ask that if you do share it, at least attribute it to us. And you won't hear me say that too often, of like, please put it, blow it out.
Thank you for coming. Oh my God. Hey, David.
Hey.
Oh my God, you got the great camera.
Oh yeah. I'm triple rigged today.
That's what I brought. We'll always have that.
So you'll be talking. This is just microphones, not connected to speakers.
I guess I should have some instructions. That way it's not bad. Always a bad listening to instructions.
Know your name. Follow the name. When it's your turn, come up and announce yourself. And please try to limit your remarks to 3 minutes. It'll help because it's already going to take an hour. Yeah. That's all right. I will begin by giving a statement on behalf of the Taylor family. It's not in there. I'll give a statement and then we'll continue on. Does anybody have any questions? All right. I'm sorry that we're all so squished together, but I'm not sorry. That's right. I'm so happy you guys are all here, and I'm so thankful for the rain. So we got about 2 minutes. Again, project. Talk loud. Talk as loud as you can. Let your voices be heard.
For those of you just tuning in, we are in Seattle, Washington. We are at Jimi Hendrix Park, and there is going to be an announcement on a series of lawsuits that are being filed against the state of Washington and against the city of Seattle. There will be statements made by plaintiffs, and there will be statements made by the attorneys. We will try to do the best as we can in audio. The weather is not the best, and there is no PA or amplification system for our speakers. The people that have been speaking have been advised to speak loudly.
For the media, we do have a fairly tight agenda, and we'd ask that you hold questions until afterwards. Everyone will be here, and you can ask all questions. But we kind of want to just go through our thing. All right. Okay. Good morning, everybody. Today, on September 25th, the Strittmatter Law Firm and Cedar Law PLLC are proud to announce that we have filed a lawsuit against the city of Seattle and the state of Washington. This lawsuit, here's the unveiling, is 100 pages long, fully illustrated, with beautiful photos of protesters getting beat up. Thank you for coming today. This is a very solemn day, but we are elated that we live in a country where we can fight for our rights. I'd like Farhad Sultani to give introductory announcements.
Hi everyone. First I would like to acknowledge the land we are on. the first people of Seattle, the Duwamish people, with honor and gratitude. We thank them and their ancestors. Additionally, we would like to recognize the history of this site. We are at Jimi Hendrix Park, which is one of the rare parks in the U.S. named after an African American icon. Steps from the Northwest African American Museum, a museum made possible through protest. For this, we thank Elder Amari, who along with fellow citizens, occupied the building in 1985 for over 8 years, until the city agreed to turn the space into a museum. Elder Amari continues to occupy the space today in order to turn it into a cultural and community center. For this, we thank him. Finally, we would like to acknowledge the activism and organization that inspires the start of our legal fight here today. The Black Lives Matter movement began in 2013 after the acquittal of George Zimmerman in the murder of 17-year-old Trayvon Martin. In that moment, activists recognized that the American legal system would not deliver justice to the Black community because it was not meant to. The culmination of continued oppression of marginalized communities resulted in a groundswell of support across the nation, and people took to the street to demand police accountability. The movement continued to grow when in 2014, the tragic deaths of Michael Brown in Ferguson, Missouri, and Eric Gardner in New York City. On May 25th, 2020, in the midst of a global pandemic, America's collective psyche was thrown into further grief. When video footage emerged of the murder of George Floyd at the hands of Minneapolis police officers. For an agonizing 8 minutes and 46 seconds, Derek Chauvin pressed his knee on the neck of 46-year-old George Floyd, ignoring pleas from onlookers to stop, and Floyd's own words that he could not breathe. American witnessed Mr. Floyd's call out to his mother and beg for his survival. The result of his words was a call to action that led to hundreds of thousands of Americans from all corners of the country protesting this nation's long history of racial inequality, as well as international protests and solidarity. Here in Seattle, thousands of nonviolent protesters have taken to the streets over the last 4 months to stand up and demand a justice system that works for everyone, especially for Black lives. Thank you.
Farhad is a law student. As you can see, the legal team here is young. We are proud of the lawsuit that has been filed. We are going to tell you the legal theories, and then you're going to hear from the plaintiffs. This lawsuit is brought on behalf of peaceful protesters. These protesters did not attack the police. They did not commit violence. They did not loot. They are like 99% of the protesters who have tried to protest on behalf of Black Lives Matter. Their peaceful protests were met with the very thing that they are protesting against. They were met by excessive force from the police. What's going to follow next is an explanation of the legal theories. I want to begin by saying that this case is being brought in state court under our state constitution, which we revere. Thank you.
City streets and sidewalks are an age-old venue for protests. And Seattle has a long history of the people using these public fora to make their voices heard on local, national, and international issues. In 1970, after the Kent State shootings, over 7,000 UW student protesters marched on I-5. In 1999, protesters appeared at the WTO to address issues such as workers' rights, sustainable economies, and other environmental and social issues. The city was criticized after this event for the mishandling of those protests, for being unprepared, and was specifically admonished by the federal court for mass arrests of protesters and others without probable cause. Over the years, Indigenous activists have led protests across Seattle and the surrounding area on numerous issues, such as reclamation of Fort Lawton, which is located on land that had belonged to Native peoples, and the impact of projects such as the Dakota Access Pipeline on the environment and on land that is sacred to the Native peoples. In 2017, over 100,000 people were drawn to the Women's March and marched through the streets of Seattle and protested at SeaTac Airport. And in the years that followed, thousands more would continue this on an annual basis. And Black Lives Matter has had numerous protests here as well, such as those after the death of Michael Brown at the hands of the police in Ferguson, Missouri, and on the anniversary of his death in the years that followed. Our government has a solemn duty to protect the people like these who are exercising their rights to speech and assembly. Yet they failed to do that in this case. They retaliated against these protesters based on the content of their words, the purpose of their protests. And that is one of the claims that we have against them in this case. Thank you.
My name is Andrew Ackley. I'm one of the lawyers with the Strip Matter firm. You all may know that Merrick Bob, the outgoing court-appointed monitor for the conduct of the Seattle Police Department, who resigned, said that he was profoundly disturbed by what looked like multiple instances of excessive force. Force is allowed to be objectively reasonable and necessary for a lawful purpose. Necessary means there is no effective alternative. What that means is this: when somebody's lawfully exercising their constitutional right to protest, any amount of force is excessive. So it should go without saying, you can't shoot members of the media in the back. You cannot choke peaceful protesters. You cannot use glass balls and explosives on people trying to disperse. You cannot indiscriminately use chemical weapons and other explosives on peaceful protesters in our state and in our community. That's exactly what happened here. People who came to protest excessive force were met with excessive force.
Seattle PD uses excessive force against many of these peaceful protesters by employing chemical agents, glass balls, flashbangs, baton rounds, rubber bullets, plastic bullets. The chemical agents that these peaceful protesters were inflicted upon caused them nausea, caused them vomiting, disruption to their menstruation, caused them asphyxiation, their asthma to be inflamed. The physical rounds, the pellets and the rubber bullets, caused deep chemical burns when they exploded. One of our clients was actually hit by a flashbang and our glass ball that exploded on her. This exploded on her. She had neck injuries, there were wrist injuries, knee injuries, bone contusions, nerve damage, muscle injuries, damaged fingers, damaged hearing, bleeding in the ears, amputation of a thumb, cardiac arrest requiring multiple resuscitations. Even after all of this, some of the peaceful protesters were wrongfully arrested and detained. While they were arrested and detained, they suffered head contusions, some suffered broken teeth, and another suffered a cavity search contrary to police policy. Finally, there were protesters who suffered because the Seattle PD and Washington State Patrol had a dereliction of their duty to protect the protesters. Because Seattle PD didn't protect the protesters, Dan Gregory had to stop a driver speeding toward a crowd and was shot. Because Washington State Patrol did not block off the freeway, Summer Taylor was run over by a driver. Now many of these protesters have PTSD because of the Seattle PD and Washington State Patrol.
Thanks, Chris. Chris Williams, Cedar Law. Protest is the lifeblood of democracy. It is what gives breath to the First Amendment in its most quintessential form. And in addition to the state and federal protections of that right, the people of Seattle have enacted a Public Observer's Bill of Rights that expressly gives people the right to observe, film, and openly criticize police practices. This municipal code tells police to expect criticism from protesters, and it prohibits them from interfering with, hurting, or using any action to interfere with this right to protest. These are the values of this community. Furthermore, our municipal code prohibits biased policing, and that is defined as selecting or rejecting a particular police tactic or strategy based on race or political ideology. It creates a cause of action against the city if the police violate this law. Those are the laws that law enforcement is supposed to enforce. Furthermore, our city code prohibits any employee from communicating information known to be false or derogatory with the intention of disrupting any lawful political activity. So when we hear that police officers have been mocking the Black Lives Matter movement, that is a violation of the values of the people of Seattle. In addition, many of our clients were reporting on the protests, and Seattle Municipal Code makes it unlawful for the police to order any news reporter or person observing or recording the events on behalf of the press to disperse. Unless they are in the way, they cannot be ordered to leave. Regular citizens may be able to be told to move under a time, place, and manner right of the First Amendment, but not reporters. We have had reporters specifically targeted with blast balls. So these are the values that are in addition to our federal and state rights. But our municipal code reflects the values of our community. We encourage other cities to enact similar ordinances in case the federal government is not coming to rescue you. And now we'll hear why state law was violated.
Laura Rushka, also of Cedar Law, and this is impact litigation. This is a collective of people reflecting the movement, bringing our individual claims together, teaming up between law firms to reflect the larger movement and that collectivist spirit. And another claim that we brought is the Washington law against discrimination. As Washingtonians, we have the right to be free from discrimination in places of public accommodation and assemblage. And these are our streets, and we have a right to assemble without discrimination. The Washington law against discrimination further protects people from retaliation when you're advocating on behalf of a discriminated class. And here, all of the protesters from different walks of life, different racial identities, different gender identities, we came together in support of Black lives and BIPOC communities disproportionately brutalized by the police. And they were retaliated for that advocacy, and they were retaliated for standing up for Black lives. And we posit that's in violation of the Washington law against discrimination.
We heard from Fred Rabb about our protest attendant injuries. Injuries are not uncommon in Seattle's long history of protests. One of the claims that we have against the city and the state is that of negligence. One, that the city failed to follow its own policies and failed to use reasonable police practices. The second one is that the city and the state failed to adequately protect its protesters from foreseeable harm. For the past 20 years, the city and the state has had plenty of time and opportunity to review its past mistakes about the excessive use of force in response to protected speech. You heard from Lisa Benedetti that in 1999, the World Trade Organization protests occurred. During those protests, the city and the state declared a state of emergency and were widely criticized for failing to handle the protests appropriately. Ultimately, class action lawsuits were filed and the city agreed to pay out over $1 million to victims of police brutality. Following WTO, 10 years later, 35 community organizations wrote a letter to the U.S. Department of Justice asking for it to review SPD's violent practices. A year later, it completed its investigation and issued a report documenting a practice of constitutional violations. Its report specifically emphasized systemic racism and biased policing. The following year, Seattle and the U.S. government entered into a consent decree requiring that Seattle essentially overhaul its use of force policies and specifically required training that its officers participate in de-escalation tactics versus escalation. Several years later, in 2015, the state's residents once again took to the streets in response to the death of Michael Brown and during May Day. Following these demonstrations, the SPD was once again criticized by numerous community organizations, including the ACLU, the Office of Public Accountability, and other minority-focused organizations. Specifically, the Office of Public Accountability criticized SPD for failing to follow its own procedures. They indiscriminately used glass balls. They failed to specifically target threats and just used chemical weapons and projectiles into crowds of people without having any planned procedure. They were also criticized for using militaristic tactics instead of discussing with their community members about how the community wants policing to occur in their state and city. In several years later, in 1999, Judge Robart, who was overseeing the consent decree between Seattle and the U.S. government, Judge Robart found that the city had fallen out of compliance with the consent decree. Specifically, he was very concerned about an incident where an officer's firing was reversed, and in this incident, the officer was found to have punched a handcuffed woman in the backseat of his police car so brutally that he fractured the orbital rim of her eye. So, Seattle and this state has had many years of experience with protests and how to conduct and organize and respond to them, but they haven't learned any lessons. After the wake of George Floyd's death and our residents coming to the streets again, the Seattle Police Department deployed the same exact tactics. They failed to learn any lessons. They came out and used tear gas, glass balls, chemical weapons, and projectiles, and harmed many of our protester clients that you see here today. Our second claim is negligence for failing to protect our protesters from foreseeable harm. Our government knew that our protesters told and they informed the public and protesters that they would close off I-5 so that it would be safe for everyone. And yet, they failed to actually close off I-5. They failed to use signages and warnings, and they failed to effectively communicate to the protesters and the public about exactly what measures they were using. Due to these failures, Jan Gregory, one of our clients, was seriously injured by a car in Capitol Hill, and Summer Taylor lost their life due to the failure specific to I-5. Thank you. This is a 100-page complaint, and so we try to summarize it for you quickly, and it's very difficult. So we encourage everybody to read this. It's an important piece of Seattle history, and it sets forth everybody's rights here together. What's going to follow now are statements from the people that have brought the claims that are in the lawsuit and that will be joining the lawsuit, and I want to just take a moment to explain that. In order to sue the government, you have to file a claim against them first. It's a procedural step that they make you take to buy them time. You have to wait 60 days once you file the complaint before you can file the lawsuit. The lawsuit has been filed by 10 people whose claim period has ended. They filed their claims, they waited 60 days, they're named in the complaint. But other people here have filed claims or are filing claims. We expect there to be approximately 50 people in this lawsuit. We have all those clients already. That's how this process is going to work. So everybody you're going to hear from is going to be in this lawsuit. Once their claim period ends, we can add them into this lawsuit. So the lawsuit will say the names of everybody and then does 1 through 40. I want to begin by talking on behalf of the Summer Taylor family, and I would ask if you wouldn't mind just come up with me. Matt and Luke. I stand here in place of Dahlia Taylor, mother to Summer Taylor, who is currently inpatient for mental health treatment. She asked me specifically to tell you this, her community, so that people who have lost their most treasured and beloved person can understand it's okay to grieve. Grief is okay. She is in inpatient treatment right now. We stand here because Summer Taylor lost their life for Black Lives Matter. We stand here today because that should not have happened, and it was the government's fault. And we file this lawsuit on behalf of Summer Taylor.
My name is Joey Weiser. I am a third-generation Seattleite, and I'm protesting because our policing institutions and our criminal punishment system continue to fail Black communities all across this country, particularly when unarmed Black women, men, and children are shot and killed by the police. From Emmett Till to Rodney King to Breonna Taylor. I think Will Smith said it best: racism is not getting worse, it's getting filmed. For me, my form of peaceful protest is my live streaming. I've interviewed countless community leaders and elected officials at the Seattle protests over the past 4 months, including state senators, state representatives, King County council members, and the majority of the Seattle City Council. And despite me being at these protests in a media capacity, and in spite of me shouting, "I'm moving back, I'm being peaceful, I'm complying," all of which can be heard and seen on my videos, I've been struck with a police bicycle, I've been shoved to the ground by officers, I've had my phone get knocked to the pavement and break, I've been attacked with pepper spray in my eyes, nose, and mouth. I've been shot at point-blank range, and I've been attacked with tear gas, a chemical warfare agent that attacks your sinuses during a pandemic, which was outlawed by the Geneva Convention after World War I in 1925.
years. To just 2 days ago, when my viral video captured an officer deliberately running over a protester's neck with his bicycle, which has now been seen all over the world. Look, I don't want white people like myself to fixate too closely on the police violence that we face during these protests. Our own experiences should not eclipse the moral imperative behind Black Lives Matter. So for me, no, this lawsuit is symbolic. Because while yes, the police violence that we've all faced and continue to face is atrocious, the larger context here is that Mayor Durkin, leaders within the Seattle Police Department, Washington State Patrol, and the City of Seattle would all rather rain down chemical weapons and explosives on their own community members, their neighbors, their friends, rather than simply hold police officers accountable for killing Black people. And that is why I continue to protest. Black Lives Matter. Thank you.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Daniel Gregory, son of Dino Gregory Sr., who passed away, who's a vet of U.S. Army for 22 years. My mom, police. I'm here to talk about that day, June 7th, where I stopped a vehicle from running into a crowd. A vehicle that should have never been going down that street. I'm sorry, guys.
Got this.
I'm a protester who supports the Black Lives Matter movement. My dad's military career, a U.S. Army drill sergeant, and a Baltimore City police officer for 22 years. My mom, a Marine, before becoming a 911 dispatcher for 32 years. Growing up, I learned that police should be human beings before they are police officers. I know this is possible because my dad was a human being before he was a police officer. We need change. I was shot while I was trying to prevent a man from running down on my fellow protesters on the East Precinct on Capitol Hill. The police had barricades to protect themselves, but there were no barricades to protect my fellow protesters who also serve the city, who are sons and daughters, mothers and fathers, people whose lives shouldn't be on the line, in fact safe when they are protesting. I am unable to hold more than 10 pounds using my right arm. PTSD and I are now associated with each other. Although I am going through things like the things I am facing, I would much rather it be me than anybody else. I absolutely, without a doubt, would put my life on the line again for my fellow protesters. We need solutions to these problems. We need citizens and workers of the city to conduct interviews and be a part of the hiring and firing process of the police department. We do not need race and sex on police reports after an individual has been caught. I highly recommend the city takes more time to listen and to have open dialogue with citizens for solutions. Thank you.
platform to stand up for Black lives whenever possible. I believe that SPD's goal in using extreme crowd control weapons whenever possible is to chill free speech and prevent further protesting. As a current law student and aspiring civil rights attorney, I do want to be clear about one thing, and that is that no amount of injuries nor intimidation and fear tactics that SPD uses will stop me from contributing to these Black Lives Matter protests and standing up for Black lives whenever possible. No matter the injuries that I've faced, people from the Black, brown, and indigenous communities have faced horrific brutality in all forms for hundreds of years. And I will stand up for people all over our country, and especially here in Seattle. And I'm here to tell you that the community of Seattle will continue fighting for everyone that members of the Seattle Police Department have taken from us too soon. We'll continue to stand up until we get justice for people like Charlene Lyles, Shay Taylor, John T. Williams, Terry Caver, and Summer Taylor.
Yeah.
I want to say that Black Lives Matter and the Seattle community will continue to stand for both. Thank you.
My name is Abby Ebenezer. I am a United States Navy veteran. I joined during the 9/11 era because I was underneath the towers when they were struck. I lost a friend that day, and I joined because I never wanted that to happen again. I wanted to fight for my family and my friends to make sure that they got the equality that I knew I was getting. That's a joke now. I was deployed twice, and I was tear gassed once in boot camp. They did that to show you that they did that to show you how to feel when the enemy put you in that type of situation so that you can actually handle it. And to know how it feels, because it's not fun getting tear gassed on purpose. Then I came home. I was grocery shopping a couple of years ago. And as I was leaving, I was called the N-word just for shopping. Because our world had a new president where people believed that they could be braver. May 25th happened, and the world finally got to stand up. I protested with others, and we were attacked. Flashbangs fell over my head, and I felt like I was back in Afghanistan again. And then I realized that I wasn't. I was home with my friends, trying to make sure that my son and myself and the rest of them had the same equal rights as everyone else did. I realized all of a sudden that I felt like the world was never going to change. That all the things that we experienced when we were deployed had literally happened here. At the end of all of that, I realized that our world is actually changing, slowly. I was a part of the ACLU. I was a part of those alongside with the ACLU fighting. And now I am fighting with these amazing people who are here, encouraging us and making sure that we have a leg to stand on. Now I am also a filmmaker. And I am also directing a film that has everything to do with the protests and the world that we believe in, along with climate change and racial profiling. Because I'm sick and tired of the media portraying us as these stereotypical figures that they see every single day. And I'm so happy that we have been given a roadway to actually make change, because my voice matters. So does the voice of my son. So does the voice of all of these people. And I'm going to keep fighting as much as I possibly can. Thank you.
right. 20 years ago, my brother was murdered by a racist in Nebraska. His killer only spent less than 24 hours in jail. At the time, I didn't stand up for racism. I didn't stand up to racism because it was something that was ingrained in our everyday lives. And at that time, I realized that the system isn't broken. It was built that way. I was moved to the streets by the murder of George Floyd. At that time, I didn't realize how many people would stand up together for Black lives. This summer, I was peacefully protesting against police brutality and white supremacy here in Seattle and was grabbed from behind by a police officer. At that time, I was assaulted by several officers and taken to jail on made-up charges. Our system isn't broken. It was built that way. It was never designed to work for people that look like me, which is why we'll always and continue to say that Black lives matter. I also just want to take the time out to acknowledge my twin flame, Sarah Anderson. She was also tear gassed, her car was flashbanged, we were pepperballed, we had things thrown at us, and I know the first day that we went out to protest, she was terrified to be out there, guys. She couldn't be out there for maybe more than an hour, and after that we were protesting from sun up to sundown for weeks, and that's all we did. And I know that that's the heart of a lot of people, millions of people, and I just want to say we appreciate you guys realizing that Black lives matter all day, every day.
Kentucky, where Breonna Taylor was murdered, and I just want to acknowledge that her killers were not brought to justice. That's a perfect example of how our system is broken and flawed and needs a complete overhaul. Thank you guys for taking the time to come out here today. Thank you.
Hi everyone. My name is Seth Kramer. Throughout my life I've done a number of things, including been a early childhood educator, been a writer, a musician, an activist, bartended, and currently I'm a graduate student at the University of Washington working on public health and social work. My own personal research revolves around the intersections of violence and mental health, and specifically how community-based organizations can work towards eliminating violence, inequality, and structures that perpetuate poor health. So there should be no surprise that what is happening here in the United States right now is something that is quite dear to me. It's something I've been focusing on. And I firmly believe that community action, community participation are the only ways that we can come to create safe communities that interrupt cycles of white supremacy, colonialism, and economic inequality. Following the murder of George Floyd, I marched consistently in the streets of Seattle for the Black Lives Matter movement from May 30th until July 25th, when a grenade was thrown at my head by SPD, in spite of the fact that those grenades are, as non-lethal ammunition, are told to be thrown at least 30 feet away from any individual. Nonetheless, as it went off close to my right ear, I received permanent hearing damage in both ears, but significantly my right, and a severe concussion, which I'm still not quite recovered from. As I'm reading this, looking at the screen, the headache is starting up again. So for the last 2 months, I've been in excruciating pain from tinnitus and headaches, unable to do the work that I had been planning on doing. I can be, at this point, I can be in front of a screen for about an hour a day, which if anyone has met me or has experienced graduate school, that seems pretty impossible, particularly in front or in spite of the global pandemic we are currently in. I am constantly working on a million things at once, and because of this, my life has become drastically interrupted. I was forced to end my summer courses early, which I received a fellowship for, put my research on hold, deny and not apply for jobs, and have put on my applications for PhD programs until next year, along with the fact that I'm not sure that I'm going to be able to continue taking classes starting next week. I hope, but we'll see what happens. Along with this, I'm not sure if I'm ever going to be able to record music again. I wake up regularly with nightmares, jump at loud noises, and live with a kind of perpetual state of anxiety. With the worry that I will be hearing on the news that more BIPOC folks and more protesters will be killed at the hands of SPD. Whether this is very reasonable or traumatic stress, you can be the judge of that at this point in time. While this may have had devastating effects on my own personal life, I'm here because I hope that what I am going through can be channeled towards justice for the BIPOC community of Seattle. I will continue to be in the streets as much as my body allows me to, and I hope that you all do the same. Black Lives Matter. Thank you all so much.
Hello, my name is Bruce Tom. Thank you for all being here. I am a journalist. I was present at the protest the evening and early morning of June 7th and June 8th. I was there just to take pictures, to actually see what was happening. And I didn't expect, I've been to dozens upon dozens of these sort of protest events, and I did not expect to get assaulted by the Seattle police. I mean, what the heck? I was standing next to kids, students, very ideal people, very nice people. And when the police, I don't know, they just seem to have conjured up a reason to just suddenly attack. And they threw everything from flashbangs, pepper balls, you name it. And I'm just really appalled by this. In fact, very offended. Is this the kind of face Seattle would like to present to the world? I mean, we were here to protest an injustice, not start a fight. And we get things like this lobbed at us. I mean, what the fuck? I mean, I'm still really angry about this.
We're with you, Bruce.
I generally go to these events and I'm very passive, I'm very respectful, and I generally get along with the police. Okay? I don't know if I could ever forgive or forget what they did. I came home bleeding. My skin was burning because it felt like a gallon of pepper spray was poured down my back. There were people in the front line trying to protect me, and the pepper spray rolled off their umbrellas down my back. I came home. My clothing was so saturated with pepper spray. It was unbelievable. I just stripped off all my clothing and tried to, I was going to launder it, and I couldn't even get near my own clothing the next day. I came home and I found that my leg was burned. I had holes in my flesh from these things. I don't know if I can remain passive anymore. I mean, as a journalist, I'm supposed to be passive. I think I've been radicalized. I mean, this is it. You want to fight? Let's do it. Bring it on.
My name is Mashad Savage. I am a 5th generation Seattleite and a protester. I have been protesting consistently since the beginning of the George Floyd protests, enduring frequent and significant abuse from the Seattle Police Department, Washington State Patrol, National Guard, and Department of Homeland Security. I have kept coming out because I, as a person of color, understand my relative privilege and the sameness of the struggle across Black, Indigenous, Brown, trans, houseless, disabled, and other systematically oppressed peoples. I do not face the same types of racial discrimination that many do. And having spent the early part of my life watching it happen to my Black lesbian mother, I understand my relative privilege as a lighter-skinned person of color very well. Especially seeing the dangers that my Black, Brown, and Indigenous family members have disproportionately suffered from. And I have repeatedly witnessed the punitive justice system that all of us here live under to be exceptionally harsh against them. During the protests against state violence in the wake of George Floyd's death, I have exercised my First Amendment right to peaceably assemble in the streets. Not only has that constitutionally protected right been violated by the Seattle Police Department, but I have been repeatedly assaulted by SPD officers for doing so. I have been tear gassed and pepper sprayed, had rubber bullets shot at me, and have had blast balls and stun grenades thrown at me, which has caused hearing damage that I am currently having assessed. As a professional musician, this poses significant threat to my livelihood and lived experience. I have chosen to join this action to vindicate this violation of my constitutional rights, the damages against my body, and against the lasting trauma that I will live with. We have asked for there to be support from local government to help us push back against the tyranny and violence that the Seattle Police Department has casually leveled against those of us who are here to remind everyone that Black Lives Matter. Free speech and assembly should not come with the risk of fatal damage to everyone's life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness.
Black Lives Matter protester. First, I acknowledge the abuse I experienced at the hands of SPD is nothing new for our Black community. The reason I protest in the first place is because SPD has murdered BIPOC community members with impunity. I have been assaulted by SPD twice now. First, on June 7th, when a protest group was sitting in front of a barricade near the East Precinct, sitting down on the ground. And we were kettled by riot cops and bike cops. They trampled us with their bikes, flashbanged, and used gas. I was shoved between officers and then pepper sprayed from 1 foot away. The officer continued to spray my back as I tried to retreat. I had a severe allergic reaction and was taken to the ER by street medics. On July 25th, I was resting with a group of protesters at Kettle Anderson, again resting, when SPD charged through the grass on bikes with no warning. They shoved me around, hit me with a baton, and threw me to the ground. An officer then dragged my limp body face down through the gravel. I could not move due to shock and injury. Then an officer picked me up and threw me into a short wall where several riot cops surrounded me. At some point, they cut the straps off my backpack. They grabbed me one more time and threw me to the ground again. I started screaming for someone to help me. Officer Roxanne Zeck said in exasperation, "Can you just stop screaming?" I was held for over 4 hours with my hands cuffed behind my back. I told officers I could not feel my fingers, but they refused to fix the cuffs. We were kept in a crowded holding cell at King County Jail overnight, denied medical care, sleep, food, water, and information. In the morning, they refused to let my support bail me out. They lied. They told me no one is here for you. They put cuffs on my damaged wrists and transferred me to Kent. It was very clear that SPD and the officers at King County Jail intended to do as much damage as possible. They laughed about it, mocked, and verbally antagonized us during this abuse. It has been exactly 2 months since my assault and detainment today. I still cannot feel my left thumb, and I have nerve pain and weakness in my arms, hands, and shoulders. I'm in pain when I do simple tasks like writing, typing, or carrying groceries. I struggle to leave the apartment by myself. I'm doing physical therapy in an attempt to reduce pain and increase function in my arms and shoulders, but I have severe physical and psychological symptoms every day. Now, because of SPD's brutality, my body cannot so easily take to the streets. I will be back, of course, but for now, litigation is a way forward. To keep saying it is not okay when the police engage in violence. It is not okay for police to injure, endanger, gas, pepper spray, and imprison demonstrators who are exercising their First Amendment right to protest. The terror that police inflict on our Black and Indigenous community members. It is time to defund the police and invest in Black community through the demands laid out by King County Equity Now, and to recall Mayor Durkin. Thank you.
I stand here so proud not only of this amazing legal team, but of these clients. They are incredible. They make our hearts sing. They make us proud. They make us incredibly angry to hear what happened to them. We will fight this litigation. We look forward to this battle. Bring it on, Seattle and state of Washington, because we are going to hold you accountable. Dear press, this has been a long conference. We tried to do our best. Our protesters believe in free speech, and so do we. We have no restrictions on them to talk to you without us, because they have a voice here, and we want that voice to ring out. Ask a question of anybody, and they'll answer it for you. You can go up to them separately. People can be brought back here. I turn this back over to the media. Thank you. Thank you. All right, the media is stunned. Anybody else have anything you want to say? All right. Please disperse and talk to whoever you want. Thank you very much.
Couldn't be more available. Couldn't be more available. Couldn't be more available.
All right, malcontents, thank you for tuning in to the event that was going on here today. You have been watching a press conference that is outlining multiple lawsuits that are being filed against the state of Washington and the city of Seattle on behalf of a number of journalists and a number of protesters for violation of both the municipal code for the city of Seattle and state law. And so I thank you for tuning in and watching. I think the content speaks for itself. Straight up, I'm cold. It is wicked miserable out here today, and it is way colder than what the forecast model said it was going to be. And so I appreciate you tuning in, and we'll be in PDX tonight. Malcontent out.